Ta-da. Hello, everyone. Matt from Soundrolling.com. Thank you for joining me at the end of 2016, nearly, which is very exciting already. And once again, I'm with Neil Hillman. Hi, Neil. How's it going?
Yeah, it's very good, thank you. It's very good. You're bookending me, aren't you? You're using me at the start and at the end of the year. That's when we last spoke. Was at the start of the year, and I was in Australia.
I know, and so now you're over in the UK for Christmas and everything like that, I assume.
Yes. Sort of semi-permanently here at the moment, finishing off my PhD at York in sound design. Still continuing to pay my way as a practitioner, so it's very much a self-funded study.
It's fantastic, and for those that haven't already seen our videos, I've posted a link below so people can check that out afterwards, where we talk kind of all about your kind of practical work and even about some of your PhD work as well. But I wanted to do just this episode on your book, Journeyman, and it came out I believe 3 years ago.
Yeah,
but I think it's 2 years ago, was it?
2013. Yeah,
2013.
So you're quite right.
And I just thought it's really interesting because I saw it come up on all of the groups again, because again, Christmas, really interesting to get more kind of reading material on gear, on anything to do with sound, really, because there's not that many specific books, especially in the niche of kind of sound recording and that kind of aspect of everything. So I'll let you do the kind of intro to the book, and then we'll just kind of talk a bit more as people become aware of what the book is. Then we're going to be talking more about kind of gear trends and yeah, how everything's moved forward.
Okay. It really came about when in 2013, when I was looking back. Actually, I was taking a whole stack of magazines I'd written since about the early 1990s for a fabulous magazine called Studio Sound that is no longer available. It sort of went out of publication about 1999, something like that. But the editor, who was incredibly patient with me, was a chap called Zenon Sherpa. And Zenon went on to start Resolution magazine. And the reviews of the equipment that are in Journeyman are basically a selection of what I think are significant, not necessarily the best kit, either idiosyncratic or interesting or a little bit, wow, isn't that funny that we thought that was what was going to be the way forward. And so over the 10 years between 2000 and 2010, I thought this is a really interesting decade, because, you know, I made a few notes about the things that sort of changed over that time. And certainly the things that came to light was the end, pretty much linear operations. So we got file-based media for the first time. This was a big thing for us. So the young guns who kind of saying, well, yeah, I realized that, you know, things used to be on tape, or they used to be on DAT and what have you. But honestly, the significance is enormous of what we can do now. Radio mics that we didn't have to have as dedicated matched pairs. We take it for granted now that you can take of a manufacturer and you can put it with any receiver, and you can flick frequencies if you need to. That was unheard of before then. We would have, in the days of VHF radio microphones, in the sort of micron days, beautiful radio mics, but you had to have them as matched crystal locked pairs. And it's this now, you know, we don't even think about it. We take that for granted. So that was really important. Significant was the emergence of a mixer that had got a recorder built into it. That was enormous for us, because obviously, well, since the quarter-inch days, we've had recorders, but now we started to get these mixers that once again took us back from that sort of 15, maybe 20 years of being joined to a camcorder by an umbilical cord, and we could be our own people again. We could be separate. We could be respected for the 50% or more, the 50% that we were contributing to the project. Suddenly, director wasn't turning up in an edit suite and as if by magic, without him understanding anything at all at where the sound had appeared from or how it had got there, you know, a sound man could have been invisible for the most part, because on videotape, they put the tape into the player and lo and behold, sound came up as well. So I have some thoughts that devalued us as a profession. And I think I have sufficient age and experience to have been before, during and after. And I have to say, from the time that I spend now with undergraduates, graduates and master students, there is a much, much healthier attitude towards the value of sound. It's really encouraging, because I've spent sort of the last 20 years, if you like, feeling pretty dispirited that actually we as a profession were, in spite of, you know, our best efforts, losing our way, losing the fight, losing the battle. I actually don't think that's the case now. And probably in the year since we last spoke, you know, my experience, I've shot a feature during that time and done post as well. And I definitely feel that there is a trend. Now, there's also a collective consciousness for all of us as recordists. And I think that post people are now working closer than ever with recordists. And we must keep that. We must keep that that spirit alive of the importance of what it is that we're doing. Not for us to get, dare I say it, like cameras where we perhaps assume that we are all important, but we do need to be proud of what it is that we do. So sort of loud and proud, quiet and proud, something like that. So that, you know, being uncoupled from the camera, I think is an enormous step forward for us.
I think it's very interesting just to hear about the just that trend aspect of because I've done a few like odd days when I come in and kind of teach other film students as well, and it's always I still find it really, really interesting, just that makeup of just thinking of how I got into sound, because I wasn't necessarily interested. Well, it's not that I wasn't interested or not, it's just I didn't really know anything about it. I didn't know anything about film, and so I went to do kind of generic film course, got to try everything out, and it just so happened that basically process of elimination got kind of into the sound department. And there still seems that with people that are already interested going to do a sound course, the sound course is obviously its own separate thing, kind of like if you took a music course, and then you have the film course, which kind of had mostly everyone else in. Again, not a fair representation of a full film crew, but there was always enough kind of directors, cameras, lighting, that kind of thing as well. So I've always found that a very interesting kind of gap as well, because any of the kind of teaching that I've done, it's to kind of bolt on to a camera stream or bolt onto a directing stream. So it'd be interesting to just hear your thoughts on how that kind of, I don't know, I guess a more because again, it's the old adage of everyone goes, okay, sound is very important, yes, and we all and everyone can nod their head and say like, yes, we've all heard amazing films, this is the film without the sound, all that kind of stuff. Have you found that there's any I don't know, trends in just how you're generally teaching to try and get a better kind of practical I don't know, a more practical approach? Because I find especially when I've done one-off things, it's very hard when you're there. You're kind of trying to teach, I guess, kind of principles or basics. But when you have to explain both a situation and the outcome you want, I kind of felt that I've already told them the answer and the question, and I'm just wanting them to replicate that. Do you have any kind of just thoughts on kind of making that link a bit more different, other than kind of like repetition?
I do. I think what's really interesting is the fact that you're talking to students who are not necessarily following sound as their prime discipline. And I like that, because that's the work that you, I, and our colleagues need to be doing. These are the people that we do need to be talking to, because folk who are focused on sound, we're going to help anyway. So I do like to ask a really awkward question, generally at the start of an introduction to a term or to a course or to a lecture or a talk, and say, how many here of you are intending that sound will be your prime source of employment or engagement when you leave university? And of course, you get the sort of shuffling of feet and the looking down at knees, and then you say, excellent. This is exactly the right time for you to be in this lecture hall, because this is designed especially for you. This is to help you to understand why sound is important, not to pay lip service or not because there's some aesthetic qualities, but, you know, we're learning about something called show business. And it's not show art, it's show business. And the business aspect of this is the way that you will hemorrhage your finite budget if you don't pay attention to sound. And the very best way that you can pay attention to sound is by looking after what happens on location, by actually originating the best quality sound that you possibly can. So armed with that, we then start to, you know, we can then explore that if you don't get this right, you won't get a distribution deal. If this is your first film, you won't get it into film festivals. I've been very lucky to be a judge on several film competitions, and that we're given as a criteria if there is a large group of films coming in is, can this be shown at 7 o'clock on BBC One? Because if it can't, if it doesn't have that basic broadcastable level, then it's not worthy of being in this competition. So this festival certainly won't have it, because people need to be able to hear what's going on. Now that, if you get that wrong, is dispiriting, because you've fallen at the first hurdle. That is avoidable. That's why you're in this lecture hall. That's why we're going to teach you why sound is your best friend. And it's okay to start to embrace it and to understand it and to think, actually, I do need to pay attention to this. So I quite like that are not necessarily going to be protagonists or practitioners. But, you know, if you're a director, you need to understand sound. If you're a producer, by crikey, you need to understand, because you're managing a budget. If you're a distributor, if you're a production manager, if you're a location manager, if you work in wardrobe, if you work in costume, there's a whole heap of departments that sound, if you like, touches. It's like a huge Venn diagram, and in the middle is sound, and lots of other departments come into it. And I think almost unlike any other department, we have a relevance to those other departments. By and large, I think that sound people, maybe it's just that we gravitate towards that, tend to be reasonable people. We are cooperative, and I think that's an atmosphere that we need to continue, that sense of collaborative filmmaking. I mentioned when we spoke last time that that's how it was when I joined the industry, and we'd only got 16mm cameras in the television studios, in the film department of the television studio that I worked at. It was absolutely the norm, collaborative. DOPs and operators would say, is that giving you a bit of an issue with your boom shadow? Would you like me to lower the light a little bit? Would you like me to knock the barn door in a little bit? Or, you know, we'd say, look, I've got a shadow on the person. I can move the microphone so I can lose the shadow on the person, but I can't lose the shadow on the set. Can you help me with that? And that always tended to be the sort of demarcation of whose responsibility is this boom shadow? Well, the set, in DOP or the gaffer can help you with that. If it's on the person, responsibility for that, and I or my assistant would make sure that that's not on there. So, and I get the feeling that there's an undercurrent coming back of, let's go back to those days of working that way. Not just a lip service. There is a whole new generation of filmmakers coming through, and I'm really energized by it. I'm really excited by it, because the folk coming through are really wanting to use sound. The other thing, of course, with sound is that it's incredible bangs for your bucks. If you think about special effects, if you think about visual rendering times and just the cost of man hours, and then compare to a sound designer creating some atmos or some special effects and what have you, it's magnitude less. So bangs for your buck sound is a great way as well to influence the quality of your film. So I'm preaching to convert there with you, Matt. I think it is pretty that we can text message to people who otherwise wouldn't appreciate it, and maybe are to say, I don't fully understand sound, but I don't really want to admit that I don't understand it, so I might be just a little bit offish with them because I haven't got, or any of those kind of sensibilities that have gone on. The current of that changing, and it's marvelous.
And so it's interesting then taking that forward to in regards to gear, I guess, and technology, especially when it comes to then bringing down the value of investments, both for sound recorders, which is great, and having more tools and all that kind of aspect as well. And I guess then the hard part becomes not just convincing them of you need this in terms of practical aspects of sound. For instance, let's say time code, saving you more time syncing up or making sure you have all your rushes and that kind of aspect. But the kind of devaluing of sound maybe isn't being followed along with the amount of expertise or execution needed to actually make that practical. Do you think that's a kind of a kind of dangerous link if we keep going on about features, about equipment that's going ever and ever cheaper? Do you think that is devaluing us to the, let's say, well, not necessarily, well, just to anyone, I guess. I mean, the people that know the worth of sound. I guess what I'm trying to say is what are the aspects in terms of the intangible that you're trying to teach? Because a lot of people are going to be focused on the practical, especially with more and more filmmakers coming in, budgets going down, equipment going down. But then does that just mean that we're on a path to everything being more and more commoditized? And I guess I'm trying to reference freelance rates, and so I'd be really interested to just hear your thoughts on all of that.
Well, I think there's two elements to the way that folk like you and I would go out on a location shoot and we would work. And one is that is specified by you and I, as we know that this is the best equipment to do the job. I don't really mind what price point that is, providing the quality threshold that it delivers is to my standards, to the delivery specifications that maybe a distributor or a broadcaster. There always is cheaper kit. There always are cheaper technicians who will do that. So we're kind of not going to win the race of I'm not the cheapest in the market. I think that it's spoken before that we have an understanding about what a rate is, a sound recordist, and that is for that person, not for his kit. That's a separate negotiation, which we'll come to in a second, but for that person who has a proven track record, who has the expertise that he's developed over years and continues to develop year after year. It's a continual development program that we're on as technicians. I have never been frightened to stand up for right rate, and that is very difficult at times. I have 3 children. They were small. They're at university now, and university, but one is still at university. So I absolutely understand what it is to be freelance, to have financial pressures, mortgage to pay and what have you. But I also know that unless you are robust in the way that you defend your own worth, there's a two-pronged sort of corrosive element to that. The first is you start to believe that yourself, doubt your own self-worth, and that's the most difficult to deal with. That's more difficult to deal with than a production manager who you absolutely know has got very little experience, has very little knowledge of you as a person, is not particularly engaged in you because they say, Matt or Neil, terrific guy, and I appreciate that you are worth this amount of money. That very rarely happens, and particularly when you are sort of fairly new to the industry. So you have to have a sense of your own worth and set that for yourself. And unless hears many times, this is not acceptable, this is not acceptable, this is not acceptable, it will be more uncomfortable for them to try and get someone for less and to get a poorer result than to pay the proper rate. There is a proper rate. We help people, we publish these rates, and that's a guideline for them. Camera departments defend their rates very well. We know that grips departments do this. Electricians, for as long as I can remember, have done that. There is nothing wrong with us as a department having that sense of self-worth and being reasonable rate that we set. So I strongly encourage people to stick to the agreed rate. As far as equipment is concerned, I think from a professional point of view, it will settle at a level, and prices move, fluctuate, but the price of kit is the price of kit, and we choose what tools we want and we set the high cost accordingly. I think to a certain extent, individual businesses, which we are, is going to be slightly different to the kit that you have, is going to be slightly different to the kit that, etc., etc., etc. This is the kit that I need to do my job. This will fulfill the requirements of what you need. The quality standards, as a professional, I say that this is going to pass your quality standards, and for that. That, I think, is the area where you might be able to do some negotiation depending on the length of booking. This is a normal commercial relationship. If you go to Richmond Film Services, if you go to any hire company, you will have the ability to have a one-off price, you have a multiple booking, you might have bulk and what have you. That's normal commerce. The thing that I think really is very important that we keep is the sense of worth of what a day rate is of hours for a trained and skilled. Try doing that with a plumber. Seriously, try doing it with any other profession. Try and go and get your car serviced. Try and barter with the bloke who's servicing your car at a main deal. It's not going to happen. So really, you know, we have plenty of support within our own kind of networks and groups to be able to establish that this is the rate. I stick to that. Do you stick to that? Yeah, I stick to that. So, you know, it's perfectly possible for us to do that, and I think it's right that we do.
Thanks. That's I think it's another area where lots of people get in touch about just various aspects, because a lot of people starting out especially understand the whole and can understand the gear to a certain aspect as well in terms of what they should be pricing that at. But again, trying to then get their own experience level as well when they feel that they're not experienced, and
it's very different.
Yeah, and getting that appropriate start, especially in the freelance world as well, where it's definitely a long-term game. You got to be the more you play the game, the slightly easier it should technically get, but definitely at the start, it's very tricky.
That's really where we as experienced practitioners need to put an arm around people coming into the industry and explain to them why it's important they defend the rate. The quick answer is that someone just entering the industry shouldn't be on the same rate as you anyway. That's because they don't have the same skill levels. So there's that aspect to it as well. But it's also important to say, you're 22 years old now. In 10 years' time, you'll be 32 and you'll be looking for a mortgage. You may have children, what have you. If you start undermining this now, if you're earning the same amount of money that you are now when you're 32, well, I'm telling you, it won't happen. It's not going to happen. So it's really important that we explain, not because, well, we're old sort of curmudgeons and that's what we want and we're going to defend it. It's actually to keep the future of the industry healthy. And it's not just about the cash, about the quality aspect and about understanding that this is a craft. It's a trade craft, and we hone our skills, and it's honed over years.
And so let's get back to that leads us nice and roundabout to Journeyman, and obviously documenting these kind of key aspects of gear and equipment. How did you first get did you just put, for instance, everything in the book that was all of your reviews that you've ever done, or what was the kind of selection process and the kind of layout of the book?
The selection process really was to go chronologically. All the reviews that had gone on in resolution, and as I say, Zen and Sherpa, who sadly died earlier this year, had given me a little bit of free rein. So what I wanted to do was to make that were interesting to read. We are interesting people. I think that we are, I'm pretty biased, but I think that we are the most interesting group of people in the film and television industry, because we seem to come from such broad backgrounds, and we bring so much to the party. And I think I wanted to reflect, and I didn't feel that there was that kind of if you like, a Jeremy Clarkson style of writing, little irreverent, but it needed to have fun, it needed to have humor, it maybe needed to be political with a small p, but at all times it must, because if there's one thing that underpins what we do, is that to a greater or lesser extent, all of us are technical. The job that we do is technical, and we need to know some very key facts about a piece of equipment to know whether it's suitable. However, wouldn't it be really nice if we could wrap that up in a little bit of a story that was interesting, made us laugh, made us think, you know, just reflected and what have you. I'd worked with Jeremy Clarkson a lot in the early 1990s when the original Top Gear came out of Pebble Mill. I was based in Birmingham and what have you. And so we had spent a lot of time, we traveled a lot to America together, and so what have you. And I'd been writing from the 90s professionally, as I said, for studio sound, and trying to do this slightly different thing. And in 1997, he got me a gig writing for Top Gear magazine. I thought, this is really interesting. Actually, I had a appeal to this, and so to continue to write in that way and to try and push as much as I could. Zenon was very patient with you know, certain stories, and I said, look, you know, the basic thing is we start and finish on a gag, and in between we give some absolutely clear information, and I will give you my opinion at the end. It will be a qualified opinion, so somebody can say, yeah, I get that you're saying that, but actually I don't think that's right. That's okay. It's perfectly okay to disagree with me or to disagree with the reviewer, providing that reviewer has sort of laid out the argument as to why they've come to that sort of conclusion. So it was about and still am incredibly excited, incredibly enthusiastic about the job that we do. It's amazing that we're able to do the job that we do, and I love it. I've wanted to do it since I was a kid, and I'm doing it, and so I'm like a child in a sweet shop. I should reflect that in the writing that I do, but pure enthusiasm alone isn't good enough. We need to be a little bit discerning. So I did over the 10 years, I looked at all of the reviews. I'm out on a kitchen table and just said yes, no, yeah, that was a bit short-lived. Oh, that was a bit idiosyncratic. That was a bit funny. That was quite nice. So I mean, I can tell you the kit that made it into the final cut if you want me to sort of just run through. And there will be people who listen to this who've never heard of this kit. And one of the things that I was very interested in as a reviewer was just what the longevity was for a manufacturer. I was always conscious that a manufacturer, when they give you a piece of equipment, that exists. And I don't think that I ever betrayed a trust to a manufacturer. Now, that wasn't that I would sycophantically write wonderful things because they'd sent me a lovely CD case to go with the box that it came in, or anything like that. But I did recognize that these guys were doing their best. They definitely were. The design teams were doing their best, but sometimes they were really barking up the wrong tree. And how would they know that unless they got some feedback from us? And that there was one, I won't say the manufacturer, but interestingly and noticeably, that manufacturer doesn't appear in Journeyman, so it's not too difficult to work out. This major manufacturer had launched a range of radio microphones, and I got advance notice from Zen and resolution. I think it was either the first or second edition, and they were also a major advertiser. And so I knew that this range was coming in. They hadn't got their UK website up running, but they had got, because they were a pan-Euro, the global company, they'd got a European that had got some English on it, and it described it as a product, the radio microphones, that cabaret singers, bingo callers, and semi-professional, basically professional on there. And I used that in the review and said, at least you're honest. It wasn't the best. It wasn't the best kit, in fairness, and they definitely could have done better and had done better. And described as semi-professional, and they really went, well, they went apoplectic actually, and rang me and said, look, they threatened that they're going to pull out of the magazine. We're stumped before we even start, because without that, they're funding us for the first 6 months of the magazine. I don't know how we're going to manage. Really, and luckily I'd taken an impression. I'd done a screen dump just for research, just kept it. And I said, I promise you, they describe it themselves as semi-professional. And I was able to send it to him anyway. What could have been a terrible, terrible situation was avoided. But otherwise, so that was the thing. Anyway, so let me read. So in, I think the first one I thought that was interest was the Rode NT4 stereo microphone. Now that's an XY phone, and that was in 2002. It's available today. It's still, it's a budget stereo mic. It's still only 350 quid now. I mean, it's very good value for money. But from 2002 to 2016, Rode have had 14 years of product life out of that. So that starts the book. The thing that ends the book, lived field mixer from Fostex called the FM3, which felt old and it lasted about 2 years. So that was in 2009. If it made 2012, I think that was probably it. But that really is a real difficulty for the manufacturers. So we talk about kit being overpriced and what have you, but they have a difficulty. They need to shift a certain number of units to recover their R&D costs and what have you. So in the book, we've got the Rode NT4 stereo microphone, the Fostex DV40, Sennheiser MKE Platinum, that was introduced, the Marantz PMD 670. Are you recognizing any of these yet? Probably not.
The companies.
You'll recognize this. The Sound Devices 302, and the 302 was launched in 2003. I thought that was really important, because we've still got that product now. But there were other products that were sort of vying for the same thing. The products that I reviewed, I think the 302 pointed the way to where we were going. And now Sound Devices, of course, has a huge hold on the market. There are others, there's Sonosax and there's Nagras and there's Zaxcons and there's all sorts of others. But really, back then in 2003, I think that the 302 with the SD card in there, and then we had it in 2 versions. You could have it with time code or not with time code. Wow, this is fantastic. We can have our own time code. What are we going to do with that? That was a very significant sort of model. What else is of interest? Well, then the 744 comes in. When did the 744? Well, the 702 came in 6. In 2008, we had the 788T, the Sound Device 788T. So if you look at the sort of those mixer recorders, there's a whole range of those location devices that are in there. But also because during that time I was also working in set up the audio suite, so that we were an end-to-end, if you like, audio supplier. So we would and then we would do the post as well. There are some pretty significant things that went on. Well, that file based, the fact that things were file based was really important. The AAF and MXF standard that we come across now all the time, that was only suggested and put forward as an AES conference that I covered in 2004. We were considering the problem of loudness well, for a long time, but in 2007 I reviewed the Dolby LM100, which was an adaptation of what they'd done for cinema, because cinema had got problems with loudness. But of course it's another 7 years before it gets adopted, and LM100s really are not necessarily as popular as Dolby perhaps would have wanted them to be to do that. They have been adapted. You can now have software upgrades, etc., etc., etc. But there are other ways that people now maintain loudness and what have you. Oh, this was interesting. This was interesting. In 2006, shotgun microphone from Scherps. Scherps had never made a shotgun microphone before, and that's the CMIT condenser microphone interference tube, the CMIT 5U. The inventor of the, I'm referring to notes here, I don't keep this in my head, I have to say. The inventor of the interference tube was Professor Gunter Kurtz. Student was the technical director of Scherps, Jörg Wuttke. And so Scherps had got this thing that the smaller the diaphragm was, the more responsive it was, and so they'd been kind of waiting for some time. And the CMIT has been an incredible success for Scherps. You know, they're an incredible company anyway, so quite interesting. So this is where we're seeing the birth of all of these things, and sort of tried to do a sort of like a rock histories, if you like, and bring it through. And particularly for folk who won't have seen this kit and think, wow, that's a bit odd, isn't it? I know that you used to use a NAG quarter inch, and I've seen those, but there's a raft things that have come in between then. You know, we've had DVD recorders. Chris Monroe recorded Die Another Day using a DVD recorder on location. So you know, I mean, there's that's one of the stories in the book here. If you can bear it, I'll read the that was the Fostex DV40. Yeah, and that was Chris Monroe. So book.
Yeah, it'd be great to hear an extract.
Okay, so this is a review of the DV40. It came from Tree, so it's quite a long way away. So it was introduced in the magazine by Zenon with this paragraph: to condemn the DAP machine to the dustbin that so many have prepared for it. She requires the adoption of DVD RAM as its replacement. Fostex's D Master Recorder provides a professional user implementation and a breathtaking features list. Is ready for so like this. As I gunned the Ford Mondeo 1.8 TD through the autumnal gold and wood smoke wisps of a Burnham Beach's late afternoon, messenger alert tone from the sat-nav cam situated in the drop-down glove box. I had to report to Z Division. From my pinpoint to Head's Heath is no mean journey. Feeling that flares her nostrils at the thrill of a chase. Until within the hour, Miss Cashcoin took my nylon rally coat, open-backed PVC driving gloves, and showed me into the Resolution editorial office that acted so plausibly Zed's workshops. Resolution magazine. Zed is a man of indeterminate years. The frequently used editorial portrait of him was in fact taken some decades earlier, Berlin. His gunmetal grey eyes quickly appraised me and held no hint of compassion for the Hackfield operative. And so he began immediately to brief me on my next mission, a mighty Fostex Corporation's new baby. the DV-40 master recorder. As a point of interest, it was used by Chris Munro on the set of the new James Bond movie, Die Another Day. And as Bond's Techmeister Q might well have said, comes fully loaded. Fostex is no stranger to digital audio mastering. It invented the timecode DAT 15 years ago and introduced the timecode capable location versions too. These PD2 and PD4 models, the PD6, promises to introduce the DVD format to feature film location recording and quickly establish itself as a digital, versatile, disc-based platform. It is robust in its belief that the DVD RAM format is the natural successor to DAT. Its reasoning is sound enough. DVD RAM has a proven durability. 100,000 rewrites are assured. And a cartridge-held disc, it offers better, I can't even read it, and I wrote it. As a cartridge-held disc, it offers better protection from the bumps and grinds that could cause external damage to the disc itself. It offers good editing facilities and built-in error correction capabilities. Error-free recording avoided by the DV-40's Verify Write technology, the film industry has quickly taken to it. Well, because it was pretty short-lived. But at the time, all of those, and I think my memory of that was that we welcomed it because we wanted to get rid of the of DAT, which was just unreliable for us. So I think I summed up the pros and cons of it as the pros were: it's a welcome replacement for timecode DAT as an industry standard platform. So enabled easy integration with the Diva location recorder. In the future, I like it and I want one. 2003, this one's okay. And then the cons. Sadly, the DV-40 will have to sit there in the rack and coexist alongside the despised DAT machines until everyone agrees to change and use them as expensive doorstops. Had it been blessed with another 4 tracks, the more loved DA-78, 88, and 98s could have gone too. So it was a time when we were using DA-88 tapes to take stems from one studio to the next. So that was that was where we were. So it recognizable to where we are now, but in a way interesting to look back.
Yeah, definitely. And do you have any kind of, I guess, thoughts on 2017? I don't know, going forward, do you foresee any? Are we coming to like, I don't know, slowing down towards our massive progression from obviously analog to digital? Within digital, do you think there's going to be as much change again, or are we just managing to fit more and more into less and less?
I think for now that the trends is we will see existing digital technology, and the ability for us to miniaturize it year on year for it to get smaller, is devices with higher quality audio recording capabilities. So if we say that, want of argument, the 24-bit is sort of bog standard now, we'll see more and more what we might consider semi-pro gear being used. You know, there's the Zaxcom personal recorders that are being used where it's difficult to get radio signals and what have you. Well, you know, here I've got in my collection is the Nagra SN, which was the all the President's Men kind of thing. That was miniaturization in the 1970s. That was miniaturization, and that was body worn by operatives. So that whole thing. You recognize there's a Zoom H4. So if you think about the audio capability between those two things, what they offer, of things is going to be what we'll see most of for the most part. That I think where the next sort of development will come.
Fantastic. I think that's a really good point to yeah, finish this and let people read the book. Obviously, you can there's links below to obviously get the book as well. And yeah, it's just always really, really interesting, especially these it's still kind of really strange, I guess, to be still so close to kind of joining the industry when even digital is being kind of, well, not figured out, but kind of standardized, as it were. So going forward, it's yeah, it's a very, very interesting place. So
It's another discussion for another day, about the difference between an analog mindset and a digital mindset, and coming into an industry if all you've known is digital, or industry having progressed from analog to digital. It's
well, we can. We have.
I think that's
If you have time,
really
if you have
interesting.
time for a quick summation of that, that would be amazing. Because obviously it's your work, it's your workflow, and obviously the limitations of equipment, I guess, plays its part as well. But what would be the main things in terms of just your general approach to a project on location?
I think perhaps the significance of between the digital and the analog is perhaps more pronounced in post, in actual fact. At its simplest, it's it's, if you like, the Pro Tools analogy of another track. So I'll just drag another track down. I'll create another track, and you end up being given a project that's got 160 tracks for no good reason. This is not a Dolby Atmos track. This is a project where somebody's just decided, well, because I can, I'll just add another track. I'll add another track, and it can appear as if audio post and the audio editing using digital audio workstations is almost like an exercise in word processing or Excel spreadsheets, as opposed to how perhaps and would have said, well, I've got these finite number of tracks. How shall I checkerboard where these things are? Where shall I put them? What's my signal flow? Log was better, by the way. I think that fantastic freedom, and I absolutely love being in the industry at this time. There is no better time, in my opinion, to be in the industry. The days of linking two 2-inch 24 tracks together and hoping that they stay in sync and all of that, that was so it's great. But I do think that there are that I can do it just because I want it. So if you like, I wrote something about it's the difference between an engineer and Imagineer. Will facilitate that. I'll make it happen. And most sound engineers, by nature, they kind of think things through, and particularly on location, you need to be resourceful and think things through. But I think that there is a tendency towards Imagineering. If I want it, I can have it, and so it goes in as a product request to the manufacturers, and the next thing you know, you've got this, that, and the other. If you right click on there and you hold that underneath there and you do that underneath there, and it's like, wow, that's really long and drawn out way of doing what we used to do by So it's dangerous to sort of say the good old days, because I don't think that's appropriate. But there is this sense that because we have so much flexibility and it gets bloated, everything gets overwrought, the sort of discipline of keeping a project to a certain size and a certain pattern and workflow, if you're not careful. There are still people in the industry who have been around long enough to say, actually, I don't want to receive Pro Tools project in this shape, please. I would like it in this shape. But I think that there is definitely this sense about digital consoles, digital audio editing workstations give rise to a different mindset, a different headspace.
Well, that brings up a really interesting point just for me myself, because I also do a bit of post-production in the back end as well, and obviously I guess the add a track thing is very interesting, especially as the checkerboarding thing as well. How are you approaching I guess how are you approaching the thing that you've put into place, which is checkerboarding and organizing your session? For instance, doing obviously sound design work like that you do, for instance, are you grouping tracks and checkerboarding things in terms of type? Are you doing it in terms of well, I need a second track because I obviously can't have two things overlapping? Are you doing smaller sessions to then condense into single sound effects that you're happy with that you then go back to? Talk to me a bit about your process in that regard.
When the work that I do in post-production will mixes to preparing for the final mix, but the final mix will always leave me, and I will take it to somewhere like Air or to Pinewood, where we're going next month, at the end of next month. And what I try to do, I tend to work with Pip Norton, who's known to quite a lot of people. Look at this. And I tend to prepare a template that, if you like, is the final mix. I look at it as if we were about to create the final stem. So I start, even though I may only be dialogue editing at some point, or then I'll be effects editing, that enables me, it's the same one. And so I can import things into it, know that will be what Pip and I will use when we mix on something. I do exactly the same if I mix a television program as well. So I make a clear differentiation between, you know, the first 8 tracks might be stereo music tracks, the next 8 tracks might be stereo effects tracks, then I'll maybe have 6 mono dialogue tracks, but it will always be there. And by knowing that template and knowing that it's something that Pip knows where it is as well, we can reach instinctively for it. So every project is done in one way every single time. If a sound effects editor supplies me with something, sound effects, that's not an issue, because I can just take that and I can import it into my master template. So if you like, I always have the final master template, and it just uses more or less tracks in that. It doesn't take up any space, so that's always that. So I all my projects are in exactly the same way. And which you can see here, Fairlight Synergy, but we have another room here that's a Pro Tools room. Fundamentally the same, whether I'm working on Pro Tools or whether I'm working on Fairlight, that same configuration of where music will be, it comes under your fingers, and you get to know where they are. So I always blend in exactly the same way.
And did you, in terms of coming up with that template, was that something that you came up with together? Did you just kind of pull it from someone else? Did you just make it up yourself just because it suited you? Like, how did you get to that first master template, as it were?
Well, interesting, the first master template, and this is an interesting point, came because it came from the Fairlight Prodigy console that we had, that there were only so many outputs. So if you were doing stems and you wanted to do you didn't want to do as many multiple passes as you might have to, then the busing arrangement. So we arrived at that by the outputs that we could have. Now the outputs are really not an issue at all. You can multiple bus, you can do multiple passes all at the same time, so it doesn't work. But it's still, for us, it still works that we keep the same template, even though and Pip's an absolute whiz, because, you know, she knows the desks much better than I do, because I know my equipment very well, and the way that our relationship works is when we get to the stage, the re-recording stage, she's doing the really hard bit of which I've done, and I thankfully allow her to do, which is, I want to send that bus 3. Now bus 3 is switched in, but it's not, I can see it but I can't hear it. Why can't I'm sending it? I've listened to the project so much that's going to, when we get to, all that I want to do is a bit like a record producer engineer. I just want to listen and just mix. So if I move fade and down, that's as much as I do, and the rest of the time I'm just listening. So that's really how we work. So hand woman because she sits on my right hand always, and she's ace.
Fantastic, cool. Well, that's really, really good. I think that's perfectly summed everything up, and we've done like another hour, I think, which is amazing.
Okay.
So it looks
Pleasure.
like we'll
Great.
be doing 2 hours every year. I'll get you back. Yes. Oh wait, say something, and then it'll appear on the screen.
Okay, so this is the book cover. It's Journeyman. I'm terribly proud that David Sonnenschein is on the front cover with it, and someone known to very, very many of us, Eddie Joseph, very, very kindly is the back quote on the back. Some of you may know Andy Farnell, very clever man. He's written the introduction to it, and I hope you enjoy it. It's fun.
Well, thank you very much, Neil, and thanks to everyone else who's been watching and viewing this as well. You can, of course, always subscribe and make sure that you always hit that little bell as well, because these kind of chats are very impromptu at the best of times, just because of just logistics of everything, of life itself. So, yeah, I hope you join me for another one. And it's goodbye from me, and I'll let Neil say goodbye, and then we'll have a little chat offline as well. So over to you, Neil, for the final goodbye.
All right, great to see everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Matt's little chats. You're doing a great job, Matt. Thank you for having me on.